Nico, welcome on the AlpMomentum podcast. So happy to have you.
Thank you. Likewise. Thanks, Michael.
We had a very great meeting actually in Italy just I think 1 or 2 months ago, and then you thankfully agreed to join the show. So maybe let's start just a little bit with you. Like, what's your background? What's your current role at Bocconi?
Sure. Absolutely. Right. So thanks again. So I guess I started my career in consulting. This was in Milan, straight after Bocconi University, which is where I graduated. And I worked in consulting about 4.5 years. Then I decided to quit and move back to London, which is where I grew up. And I went to London to do an MBA. And then after the MBA, I started working in a startup. And this was 2008 in London. So, pretty drastic moment in terms of looking for funds. We were an online booking engine for budget accommodation. So if you've heard of a company today called Hostel World, we were the smaller, less successful version of that called Hostel Mania. But this lasted for about a year, and it was a very interesting experience in terms of trying to manage very limited amount of resources in a tough moment and managing a team and building the business. But eventually just didn't work out because there was no way we could find funding, and it was really, really quite tough. But as I said, very, very interesting learning experience. After which I went on to work in something completely different, which was a French multinational, still in London. Uh, at the time, it was called Accor Services. Later became Eden Red, which, depending on where you live, you may have heard of because of luncheon vouchers, prepaid cards, employee benefits, incentives and rewards, corporate payments, and that kind of stuff. It's one of those companies not many people know about, but sits on a pile of cash. So very different situation from when I was in the startup. And I worked for this company in total for about 6 years, uh, between London and Paris, because then I was moved to headquarters in Paris, and my role there was to manage new product and new market development opportunities, looking for new revenue streams, new products, and new markets. And this was also very interesting because it meant introducing new processes and procedures within the company that weren't there. And in my role in Eden Red in Paris, I then was asked to manage the investment that Eden Red had made in the venture capital fund called Partech. And in working with Partech in my role still Eden Red, I started actually working at Partech for at least 1 or 2 days a week, looking at the deal flow, working with the partners in terms of meeting some of the founders and looking for either direct investment opportunities in the startups and also business development opportunities to make the company more competitive. Because this relationship worked particularly well, then the opportunity arose for me to join the venture capital fund, which I then did. And I was then with Partech for about 5 years. And this was very interesting because I, could look at a lot of deals, work with a lot of other corporate investors as well, because at the time the fund had about 1.2, 1.3 billion euro of assets under management. And between 30 and 35% of those came from corporate LPs. And so the idea was to make the most of these opportunities for the portfolio companies and make sure that the fundraising with the corporates kept on, having the same kind of success. And then when I was there, I got a call from Bocconi asking me if I was interested in hopping onto this new project. Cut a long story short, I said yes. So I quit my job in Paris. I quit Paris and moved to Milan to set up this brand new division, which is called Bocconi for Innovation, of which I'm now the operating director. And the idea is to support entrepreneurship and put Bocconi more on the map when it comes to entrepreneurial support and I guess, nurturing entrepreneurial skill sets. One of the things that attracted me to this role, even though I was perfectly happy in Partech, perfectly happy in Paris, after initial phase in Paris where I had set up and so on, but was the fact that it's really within the role of a university, to help people with an entrepreneurial drive to get going. And the countries such as Italy, where there's still a lot to be done in terms of entrepreneurial support and the venture capital system and so on, I thought, well, if a university doesn't put itself on the front line, then that's not good. So I like the fact that Bocconi really wanted to be there, and also within Italy, Bocconi has a very strong position. I thought this looks like a good alignment of stars in terms of a very interesting and valuable player that wants to do something that's very interesting and very valuable in the market that desperately needs this kind of support. So the idea of being part of a team that could do this excited me, and to be honest, I'm very happy I accepted, because 4 or 5 years down the line, I'm pretty happy about the things that we're doing and that we still have to do. So in a nutshell, that's how I got to where I am right now.
Amazing journey. So really from own startup investment experience, as well as experience with as an investor. So that's really great. So maybe you can also go down into beyond your real experiences. What type of kind of leadership style do you have? What kind of guiding philosophy?
Yeah, that's a nice one. I wonder what my team would say about this as opposed to what I'm about to say, because I think that's where the truth lies. I strongly believe in leadership by example. So I really think that the role of a manager is to put the team in the best possible position to do its job as best as possible. And sometimes that means doing some of the dirty work that can free the I guess the journey and the way for the team to do the valuable stuff that you then need to report on. And when I say that, I mean very often I'm the one who's, let's say, fighting the political battles, so to speak, and making sure that some of the bureaucracy and problems doesn't fall onto the team so it can run as smoothly as possible, and which then shows the value of what we can do that can help me clear out some of the issues that might come from an institutional level, and so on and so forth. And then I also believe in delegating. But before delegating, because there's a thin line between being lazy and delegating. Like, if you delegate, it means you need to be sure that you can, and that the people who you're delegating to have acquired ownership and the necessary confidence to do their job properly. But I'm not saying tell someone to do something and then expect them to get on with it, just without having any investment of time in helping them. So I try and spend the adequate amount of time in helping someone be in the position to then take something up on his or her own, and then leaving that responsibility as soon as I can, because taking ownership is one of the things that allows people to grow the most, and then to bring their own ideas to. And so far that's worked pretty well. um I'm not a micromanager, but I'm definitely not a micromanager, but I do definitely expect attention to detail in everything that we do, because it shows even in the way you answer emails, the way you present your division to other people, both within and outside the business. And so we take once that is kind of we all agree on, okay, this is the format, this is the message, then everyone's basically. I'm always delighted when team members of the team can go out and represent B4I in events and other moments, because I think that's a perfect example of when people can grow their own personal brand, and therefore, as a consequence, represent B4I as a brand as best as possible. Obviously, this comes with the risk, which is people are very visible and they can potentially be, very attractive for other employers. But that's how it is. I mean, if B4I becomes a great stepping stone for people's careers, then in turn, it should be able to attract other talents as well. And so far that's happened. I've got some people who've been with me for quite a few years, and I'm very happy about that, despite the fact they've received other offers, and other people who have left, and other great people who have joined. So it kind of works out. The more I believe in serendipity, let's also add this. The more good you try to share, the more opportunities should come, will come your way. And as fluffy as this might sound, I'm actually seeing this in practice that happening. So going back to the management style, the idea is to definitely delegate when it's appropriate to delegate, but definitely delegate. And allow people to bring their ideas to the table and discuss it. I'm a strong believer in the discussion, and in when necessary, take the executive decision. But I prefer to have people who, let's say, don't do something just because I'm saying so. I'm not a huge fan of that.
Absolutely. Maybe can you quickly describe? You mentioned B4I. I think it stands for Bocconi for Innovation. What type of department, institution is it? What's your vision? What's your mission with that? And then also, how does a typical day in your role look like? And what's your kind of tasks and goals?
Absolutely. So, Bocconi for Innovation, I think it's important to say, first of all, it's part of Bocconi University. It's not a separate legal entity. We do have a fund, and I'll get into that. And that fund is a separate legal entity, but the fund is a tool for B4I. It's not the core part of B4I. So, B4I is a division of the university that is focused on nurturing and supporting entrepreneurship. And we work with founders who are alumni and students of any university, not just Bocconi, but any university, both on the national and international level. And we provide support for very, very early stage founders and for early stage founders through a pre-acceleration program and an acceleration program. The main difference between these two programs is that the pre-acceleration program can be, let's say, Michael and Nico have a business idea and they've started working on how to try and bring something to the market for the very first time, but they need to put to the test the hypotheses on top of which, Michael and Nico are building their new business and their new project. The pre-acceleration program can help them do that. And we can go from, let's say, idea to prototype or MVP, whatever you want to call it, thanks to this program, which, with the help of mentors and legal support, and I would say support that is relevant regardless of whether we're working on robotics or a SaaS, is going to help us move forward. We then go into the details of our project with the mentors that we are linked to on the basis of the industry we work in, the tech we work in, and the knowledge and expertise that we lack, so that the mentors can bring that to the table. We have about 15 to 18 companies per batch, 2 batches per year in pre-acceleration. And at the end, we bring about a third of these in front of potential investors, because 2/3 aren't really ready to present themselves properly to investors for the first time. Uh, the acceleration program, on the other hand, is for companies which have a full-time team, have a legal entity, and have an initial sign of market validation behind them. This means that they already have potentially some clients, or at least some pilot projects, some tests, and something that can show us that there's initial sign of a potential for a product market fit. The acceleration program is a more full-time setup than the pre-acceleration program, because we expect founders to do nothing else other than work on their company. And this is where we have full-on legal clinics with law firms and the law school of Bocconi, that provides pro bono legal support to the founders. Um, Marketing and digital marketing support, obviously financial planning when necessary, business strategy, contacts with angels, VCs, mentors, alumni, uh, other more experienced entrepreneurs. I mean, there's a whole host of things that we do together with the founders during the acceleration program, and the idea is to facilitate their lives as founders, to make them better founders and help them grow their business. There's also an investment of €50,000 that we make through the fund I was referring to earlier. And the fund takes up to 5% equity, no more than five in the businesses. Um, and the idea, therefore, is to help them then after the program as well through a scale up phase of the support that we provide to the companies, helping them recruit talent, raise further rounds of investment. Like usually it's seed and Series A. We haven't we started about 4.5 years ago, so we haven't really got to much later stages at the moment. Um, and that's in again quite rapidly an overview of the kind of work that we do. We take between 5 and 8 companies per batch, 2 batches per year in the acceleration program, and this is we usually receive between 350 and 370 applications per batch, so roughly just over 700 applications per year. And the selection process is quite strict actually, because then we narrow that down to 15 in pre-acceleration, around 6 or 7 in acceleration per batch. So within the university, we also work a lot with other entrepreneurial courses. So we often talk in class to the students about venture capital, entrepreneurship. Very often we are part of juries when there are, entrepreneurship courses that ask students to present their ideas. We are almost always involved in let's say feedback sessions, as if we were the investors looking at these projects and these ideas. And this both at a university level and also at a master's level, so MBAs and executive MBAs, because Bocconi University has both these, let's say, entities that deliver, let's say, undergraduate and graduate programs and masters and MBAs.
I mean, super interesting. So maybe you can quickly share how big is your team, but then also quickly share like actually what is Bocconi University. If not everybody, I assume will maybe be exactly familiar. Where is located? How many students? How many professors? So just a short snapshot.
Absolutely. So the B4I team is has a full-time team base now. This is very recent, of 10. Uh, and then we have another 3/5 that join on an ad hoc basis, based on the needs and the projects we need to work on. Would I like this to be a bigger team? Yes, of course, because it always seems as if we are, stacked. But at the moment, this is already a nice improvement from last year because we were about 8. So actually, I've got to be honest, it was nice to be able to bring on board 2 more full-time team members. Um, how does that fit within the whole university? The Bocconi University is based in Milan. It has, I would say, 2 main divisions. Bocconi University, as I was saying, for graduate and undergraduate. So that's straight out of high school. 19 years old, 20 years old, whatever. Up to you've got your 3 years, and then your 2 years masters, and that's kind of your initial, classic university studies, where you can do anything from economics, business management, the basically you name it, as long as it's linked to business, and also law and legal studies. And then you've got the masters, which is called SDA, SDA, which is an acronym for Scuola di Direzione Aziendale, which basically means it's the business school. That's where you get your MBAs, your executive MBAs, your executive education, and those kind of courses. In total, the campus has about 14 to 15,000 students on campus. Uh, and the student base is very international. In fact, now more than half of the courses are taught in English. And the idea is to keep it that way. And this has been a trend over the past few years to heavily internationalize the student base. Um, it's it's now. I mean, I may as well say this now. The MBA is ranked number 3 in the world. So that's something that's really been, FT rankings. So,
Wow.
this, take it or, take it as it is. Rankings are whatever you want them to be, I guess, but it's
You
still,
should be proud. You
but it
should
is
be
a very
proud.
good, it is a very, very good position. It's very good. And the school has a strong link with the local community as well, because there's a lot of real estate development that the university takes care of. This might sound silly, but I think it's quite important because the campus has widened and has built infrastructures that are available for, whoever lives in that area as well, such as a sports complex and gardens and pedestrian areas and so on. And I think that's quite important because it's uh it's always been a university that's been in the spotlight. So it's been at least in Italy. So it's always very careful about the impact it has on the local community, and it tries to do the best it can to make sure that that's a positive one. And research is at the heart of the university, as for any other university, obviously. I am not personally involved in the research activities because I am not in an academic position. As you heard, I'm not an academic. I've not pursued an academic career. Um, so I think that's a peculiarity of where B4I stands within the university. So we are not, we have very strong ties with the academic body of Bocconi, obviously. In fact, there are 3 people who are one of those 3 to 5 part-time team members who are very heavily involved, and they help us, push our content towards the students, and they help us with the integration with the academic life of the university, and that's very, very helpful, and I guess a core part of what we do. But we are not directly involved in the research output of the university for the moment. This is something that we're working on, that we know we can contribute to.
So that's very interesting. So Bocconi for Innovation is essentially a completely separate entity from the university in terms of, let's say, if you have research and teaching, and maybe you can also, my follow-on question would be, what role would you have in teaching? But then you're really focused on company creation, on building,
100%.
correct?
Correct. You're absolutely right. We are, so that's the, also, let me, I think this is important and interesting about Bocconi University. I'm not sure whether this is the same as other universities. I know about some. The governance structure. I think it's important to mention the governance structure of the university because it can help me then explain B4I's position. So in Bocconi University, you have a rector and a managing director. The rector is in charge of the academic side of the university, obviously. So when it comes to defining the programs and managing the professors and the academic staff and so on. The managing director is in charge of managing the university as a company, as a business. B4I kind of sits in between those two. So we report to the managing director because it's an entity of the business, and we don't have, let's just say, full-time academic staff within our team, because we are people who come from venture capital, we're people who come from businesses, from startups and so on. So we're not people with an academic career. So as you were saying, we are focused on building companies, on helping founders build companies, I should say, sorry. But the contribution we can make to the academic column of the university is very important, because when it comes to the hardcore, on the field, empirical support in building a business, we're the ones who can help students do that. And so that's how we are then brought into classes and how we are asked to deliver some parts of the content of some of the classes when it comes to entrepreneurship and so on. Hence why the link between, let's say, business and academia is very strong within Bocconi for Innovation, and it has this, I would say, hybrid system that other divisions of the university don't necessarily have. I hope that makes sense.
And Absolutely, absolutely. It's very interesting. It's like actually nearly similar, very similar. If you would build a accelerator or spin out factory for a corporation.
I agree. I
Um,
agree.
so that's quite interesting. Maybe one thing is there anything you have observed in terms of innovations how Bocconi is doing teaching? Why? Anything that stands out from your perspective?
Um, so I can answer based on what I've seen, which is far from everything. So I'm putting my response and my reply into context. So I think, like I guess any other university, Bocconi really had to step up its game during COVID in terms of an alternative to on-campus teaching methods. So I have to say, credit where credit's due. The university was extremely quick in implementing, online tools and making sure that they were slick and that they, worked and so on. And at the same time, they also introduced some kind of learning and teaching classrooms that were a bit more immersive and I guess an experiment in terms of the layout of the classroom, the videos, the audio setup, and so I'm moving both in terms of the experience, the teaching, or I would say the learning experience, and the teaching, I guess, output. When it comes to teaching methods, I mean, I challenge any university to say that it's radically different from, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years ago. Like, we're still talking about a professor standing in front of a classroom. Um, what is different, I guess, is there's more and more use of things like group work, which might sound obvious, but not necessarily. It's not been like that obvious. Maybe in Italy, there's a lot more group work now and a lot more case study work. And what I see is that there are more and more professors who have had an industry experience teaching those topics that require that industry experience. And I think that's brought in a lot of value. And that's also why even I have been more and more involved in certain classes because, as I said, I'm not a PhD. I don't have your classic. I'm never. I don't even want that career. That's not what I wanted, and not I want. But the kind of input that's asked of me is more linked to a hands-on, less research-based content that is you know, uh, shared with students in those topics where this is relevant. Because obviously there are still many other topics where research is at the heart of what you need to learn, and I strongly believe in that clearly. But I think there's more and more awareness of the fact that you need to bring on board figures that are now called professor of practice, which basically means people who have with a very, very, very solid and very strong industrial and professional career behind them, who can then become full-time professors using their experience to teach. And I think that's interesting because when I was at university, I didn't have any of those, and I think this is an interesting shift.
Indeed, I've never heard the expression "professor of practice," so that's pretty cool. Uh, maybe another to another area. For example, the president of Technical University of Munich has told me that the role of student initiatives is ever increasing, and part of he sees actually the actual learning more happening in these initiatives where they apply theoretical concept into practice. And it nearly sounds as if they want to organize the university much more around these students' initiatives to learn in small groups? What role do they play at Bocconi?
That's a fantastic question, and I totally agree with what you just said and what the president you're referring to said. Student initiatives, student-led initiatives, first of all, enrich the student experience because it gives more responsibility to the students themselves to organize events, to pick topics, to look for speakers that are relevant to the topic they want to talk about, and it kind of it enriches their own responsibility. It increases their own responsibility in their own learning experience within the university, which has various benefits. One of which is they feel they contributed themselves to the quality of what they're learning, which I think is a very strong empowerment tool and experience that will tie them even more to their university because they will be able to say, oh, the university allowed me to do this. And I learned a lot in terms of project management as well during the experience. So this is just something I want to say because it underlines how important these things are, regardless of the topics that we're talking about. Getting to the topics and the content. So yes, in Bocconi, there are lots of student associations, and B4I works with quite a few of them linked to entrepreneurship, venture capital, and so on. And we actually helped one of them actually set up. So there's Entrepreneurship Club at Bocconi, there's the Bocconi Students Venture Capital Association, there's the Women Founders Association as well. And this is, we help them organize events also in our own venues and in our own locations. We help them choose speakers, and we also let them have student organization meetings in our own offices when they book a room and so on. So that is just to say that we want student associations to see B4I as a place where they can work on delivering value to the members of their student associations and therefore to the university. Um, the kind of initiatives are linked to bringing entrepreneurs in to talk about their experience, bringing industry experts to talk about their experience, um, discussing about venture capital deals and investments. So bringing in VCs as well to talk about, okay, what are the classic terms of a term sheet? What is a term sheet? What should you be careful about? And these kind of things. And this brings to life the topics of entrepreneurship much more than they would be allowed to if it were just something that you talk about during a class. And the university believes in this. We strongly believe in this, and it kind of helps. Let's just say that the end goal, or one of the end goals, is to improve the average level of awareness that first-time founders have on topics such as finding a co-founder, thinking about a need that you should address and what you should find a solution for. So looking beyond your own small world and what it means to approach an investor for the first time and so on.
Really, really cool. So let's go a little bit or deeper into the whole topic of entrepreneurship. And first of all, congratulations to the amazing, I think, 12th spot of all universities in Europe in the Redstone University Index in terms of how efficient universities are in creating startups. So that was really a huge achievement.
Thank you. We're really, really
And yes, I think that really also very visibly put the great work you're doing and your colleagues at Bocconi into the spotlight. But maybe let's start with sharing some examples. What are the biggest success stories that originated out of Bocconi or B4I?
well. I Obviously it depends on how you define success because let's say B4I started. The first programs finished in March 2020. So, it's not like we've had years and years of track record behind us. So, the success stories that I would talk about right now are about employment growth, um, revenues, and funds that have been raised when they were required. Um, I would mention a couple. One of them is a company that basically delivers crime data analysis for a host of different kinds of clients, and from local authorities to fashion companies, real estate funds and companies, public transport companies, and so on. And they've been able to grow organically without raising any money, and reaching 100% revenue growth, since their inception. And this is because they basically found a product market fit, I would say almost instantly, but also adapting to the needs of their clients pretty quickly. So initially, they provided a back end business intelligence and data visualization software, but then they realized that uh, the raw data was actually what the companies really wanted. And so they shifted away from their initial model and have managed to very, very nicely settle into the new model. The company's called Mindcrime, and I think they're doing really well. Another company, and this is an example of a company with organic growth, no fundraising, bootstrap for the moment, and on an interesting path. Another company that I would mention does something that is let's be honest, not very interesting and not very sexy, but they're growing a lot. So they started off with digital menus. Obviously, during COVID, this is a big thing. But what they've managed to do is integrate this initial offering with a payment platform for restaurants so that you can pay from your table and so on, and which is now their main product, with the menus being, let's say, I'm not going to call it the cash cow because it's not as if they're that big yet, but that's basically where it's heading. And they have grown now all over the country. They have now developed strong ties actually with Eden Red because of the luncheon vouchers. So you can use luncheon vouchers in their solution, and that has obviously been a huge boost in terms of the reach of restaurants in the
And
country.
what's the
It's
name of the
it's
company?
called Code Up, with a Q.
So Code Up. If you're a restaurant, go to
Yes,
Code Up.
yes, exactly. And they have raised, their a very initial seed round of about 2.5 million with very, very good terms. And in 2025, it's likely that they'll go to a Series A, and they're on your classic VC growth trajectory path. And there are a couple of others who are in this trajectory as well. So another I'd like to
Cool. And
mention.
maybe and just yeah, or please, maybe also can you share like what's the large? Obviously, people are always interested. What's the largest company in terms of employee valuation or revenue size that has ever come out of Bocconi over the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years?
Well, that's I mean, you catch me slightly off guard because something that Bocconi has not been particularly, I guess, detailed on yet has been tracking its entrepreneurs over the past 2 to 3 decades. Now, I can definitely mention, you've probably heard of Pay. That's one of the Italian
Perfect.
unicorns. That was set up by Italian Bocconi alumni in Italy. You probably heard of Casavo, although recently that's been going through a bit of a difficult time. But that was also set up by a Bocconi alum. Um, and there are, several other noticeable Italian scale-ups that come from Bocconi alumni. So that's something that, and in various industries as well. So Bocconi certainly has a very strong history of, I would say, creating or putting out there in the market valuable and ambitious founders. It's just that, but this is not necessarily Bocconi's fault. Italy hasn't been fully switched on to this topic enough. When you say 20, 30 years ago,
I think Italy has. Yeah, I think I mean Italy. Oh yeah, I think that's true for most parts of Europe. I think, I mean, in the end, Italy is so successful, especially the northern Italy part, as an entrepreneurial hub. Lots of medium-sized companies, but also actually a lot of world market leader in many different areas coming out there. Yeah, I think it's very underappreciated for its economic and also technical successes.
I agree with you. I'm extremely critical of Italy, but I totally agree with what you just said. In fact, one thing that we're thinking about within B4I, although we're far from being there, is that because of the fact that Italy is extremely strong when it comes to, I would define it as traditional entrepreneurship. So we're not necessarily talking about the new digital ventures. We're talking mostly maybe about production, industry, also some hardware linked entrepreneurship. And these dynamics are different from your potentially super fast digital VC trajectories. But that doesn't mean that it's not entrepreneurship. On the contrary, of course, it's entrepreneurship. In fact, the country is built on SMEs. uh, it also has world leaders amongst these SMEs, and some of these SMEs become large companies. But differently to France, for example, where there are very many multinationals, Italy doesn't have very many multinationals. So it's kind of less obvious that there's a lot of entrepreneurship going on in the country. That said, this also makes it harder for exits to happen in Italy at the hands of a large Italian multinational, simply because there are fewer large Italian multinationals there ready to pay the big money for an interesting new company. Um, but that's a different
But isn't
topic.
maybe isn't that I don't know if that's the right argument, because also if you look at a lot of the large French tech companies, it's not necessarily the large traditional French corporations that buy them.
You're right, but it is the large French corporations that are LPs in a lot of the VCs in France. And VCs in Italy don't have that same pool of LP money to raise from, which can help them increase the size of their funds. So you're right about the exits don't necessarily come from the large corporates in the same country, although in France that has happened, and I witnessed quite a few of them when I was at Partech. But it's also about putting money into the system that can help VCs invest in entrepreneurship, be it traditional, let's call it non-digital entrepreneurship, but also more digital. And let's say when we talk about VC-backed companies today, the ones that we talk about more frequently.
That is so true. I think in general in Europe we need to get more institutional money from like large pension funds, insurances into the system. But and the French have been particularly good at that. I think, and now like 10, 15 years later, you really see the results of that. So I think that's really a great example. But would you say, for like what you're really seeing, and you're like, I think, the most entrepreneurial university in Italy by far, um, could could your startups, could the founders, the students have more success if there was more money available?
The lazy answer is yes, because I mean, um, but let's see. Let's try and be a bit more picky. I mean, some of the companies that we have seen have not needed funding because they started off with a very good business model. And that is much more interesting than a company that has a very good business model that relies on VC funding. So it depends on what we're talking about more money. If more money is only linked to more investments, maybe that's not necessarily the case, because it does in one way or another force you to find a model that makes you kind of sustainable, although that's not always, you know, enough. But if more money also refers to more clients willing to test what you're selling and willing to pay for an initial test or for initial proof of concept and help you grow as a client that has the, allow me to say, the open mind to try something new, then yes, of course. And I think that's important because the mindset has to be that innovation has to be given a chance. And in order for it to be given a chance, I also need to pay for this innovation. I can't expect a startup to do something for free. To me, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And getting that out of
What
the
what is
mindset
what
is important.
what have been, in your perspective, the key pillars or building blocks to create this great entrepreneurial mindset from the like Bocconi students?
Um, I think it's been, I was mentioning this earlier, an increased amount of awareness of what it means to start a business because there's more content delivered by the university that allows you to have a clearer idea of what it means and to give me more faith in saying, you know what, I think I can do this. I'm not going to apply for, let's say, a regular job. I can actually try and build my own company. And this has led to
And
second-time founders as well, and this is what's been a huge element of success.
absolutely, I mean, in general, my mindset is so important. But let's say one of the critiques, especially of business schools, is that the world's biggest problems today are physical and really complex technical problems, while let's say then like business schools mainly create some software and internet companies. What would you answer them, and how do you tackle that topic?
So first of all, nothing wrong with software and internet companies. I mean, we're talking to each other thanks to an internet company right now. So I mean, it's nothing wrong with that. However, you're absolutely right. There are hard problems that need hardware, and deep tech, and we strongly believe in that. In fact, 30% of the applications and the companies that we look at for our programs come from Bocconi related founders. 70% comes from founders linked to other universities. And this means technical universities, polytechnics, engineering schools, the Italian Institute for Technology in Genoa, which deals with robotics. So we bring in a host of hardware and deep tech companies. Now, the question you might have now is, yeah, okay, but what do you know about hardware and deep tech? Quite frankly, almost nothing. But that's not the point. They don't come to us to build their hardware and their deep tech. Of course not. Bocconi isn't where you build your technology, but Bocconi is where you can build your business around your technology. And so that's where we can be helpful in working with you on developing proper work structures, prioritizing your resources, recruiting the right people, giving you the business acumen that you might not have because it's just not been your upbringing and your skill set, putting you in contact in the right way and at the right time with the right kind of investors when you need them, giving you the business development opportunities you need in terms of sales. And this is where I would guess the beauty, so to speak, of the model works, which is we can also work with deep tech and hardware companies at a later TRL. So obviously not at TRL 1, but if you're TRL 6, of course. And we've done that very often. And we have, we about at least 10%.
Can you, to the listeners, maybe TRL, explain that very quickly?
Sorry, of course, TRL stands for, forgive me, technology readiness level. So it's the acronym used by, let's say, hardware and deep tech companies to define how close they are to, how ready they are, technology readiness level, how ready they are to deploy their product on the market. And it goes from 1 to 8, where basically 1 is
So you could,
a screw,
so,
8
sorry,
is the full robot.
Perfect. So you could say it's like nearly Bocconi built a second funnel. So you have basically the funnel from students from Bocconi that go to the kind of innovation center or acceleration programs. But then you basically have a second funnel that goes in, which is from everybody around the world from the outside who can apply. And then you match them, bring them together, and help people to build their companies. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct. Because, I mean, one of the best things that we see is the work that is done not by us, but by the founders themselves, amongst themselves, both of the current batches and between the current batches and the previous batches. The amount of, I mean, I'm not saying anything new, obviously, but the amount of knowledge and skill that the network brings to the table is so much greater than anything we can bring as individuals, right? So when you see, um, a SaaS CEO talking to a CEO who's in charge of a company that is working on a super microscope, you might ask yourself, well, what are they exchanging about? Well, you know what? Um, they will still be talking about fundraising, they'll still be talking about recruiting, still be talking about management styles, which is so important to make sure you fine tune that at the beginning of the company. About even using things like uh, accounting software, you know, which one do you recommend, or project management software, which one, and that enrichment and cross contamination really works between founders who you might think have nothing really to talk about, but they do. And
Yeah.
it's
Well,
part of the
maybe
forgive me, I get carried away, sorry.
yeah. Just because we're I think nearing the end. One last thing that I think particularly interesting I would like to touch upon is or go deeper is your fund. You mentioned that you or Bocconi has an own VC fund. Could you explain briefly like how is it set up? How big is it? Who are the investors? How big is the different ticket? Do you follow on, etc.?
Sure. So B4I Fund is the separate legal entity and is regulated by Bank of Italy and other institutional parties. At the moment, the sole investor is Bocconi University, which has committed 6 million. And as of now, we're starting fundraising with external investors so that we will be in the position to carry out a selection of follow-on investments in some of the companies that did our acceleration program, maybe some of the companies that did our pre-acceleration program, or other companies not linked to our programs that might be interesting for the university, such as uh, you know activities that the university might be involved in directly. So we're talking about ed tech and so on, but it can go beyond that. The tickets will be around 250K. We won't be lead investors because it's not Bocconi is not a VC and it's not looking to become a VC, but it wants its funds so that it can, as I was saying, provide further support to the companies that it's helped grow within the programs and potentially beyond that. The kind of investors we're looking for ideally are close to the university so that they also understand the underlying mission of B4I, which is different from the underlying mission of a pure VC. So obviously we need to give returns to our investors, of course, but it's not that that's our only focus. We are within a university whose goal it is to support entrepreneurship and to help companies grow. Um, and the amount that we will be looking for, well, first of all, the legal setup of the fund means that we cannot in any case raise more than 25 million because that's the type of fund in Italy that it is. It's called Società di Investimento Semplice, which means simple investment company, basically. That's very badly translated. That's what it means. By the way, simple, not really, because bureaucracy and admin is huge, unfortunately, even with the adjective simple. But we'll see how much we will look to raise, but in any case, it's not going to be more than 25, and we'll see. But that's just to give you the initial indications.
And who is deciding on an investment?
So I'm on the board of this fund together with other two Bocconi members. So that's three Bocconi members and three non-Bocconi members who have experience in the field and so on. And it's the board that decides. It decides on the basis of what I bring as a selection. So let's say I was saying, let's say 370 companies apply to our program. Eventually, I bring a list of about 10 shortlisted companies. The board, out of those 10, then picks between 6 and 8 maximum. So that's just to give you a quick idea of the selection process.
That's really cool. I think you're also really on the front runner side here. I've heard from one or the other university that they're also thinking about launching a fund. But hopefully it's going to be more a movement.
Look, the alternative is to latch onto an existing fund. So instead of setting up your own one, you link to an existing one, which can be a very smart idea because you, let's say, leapfrog the admin mayhem of setting up a fund. However, as always, there are pros and cons. You're not fully in control of where that fund invests and what it does, and also of the mission of that fund. So I do believe that the mission of a classic VC is obviously different from the mission of a fund that stems from a university. So I think that might be something to be taken into consideration. But we'll see. It's got to be hard work now, that's for sure. Oops, Michael, I can't hear you. I'm afraid. Michael, I can't hear you.
Yeah. It's a great initiative anyhow.
Yeah, I believe so.
So it's for sure will add to the ecosystem. Maybe like final question. If people are listening, is there anything you're looking for, you wish for? When should people think about you or Bocconi?
Okay, well, thanks for the question. I appreciate that a lot. Well, so we will open the next call for applications in mid-November. So as always, we're always very hungry and very thirsty for talent, and challenging ideas and projects to work with. We go scouting directly to the various events, the classic ones you can imagine, Slush, Summit, blah 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 blah, and so on. And we also rely on a certain large number of incoming applications as well, and word of mouth between the founders. But if anyone knows, or if anyone listening is a founder who's interested in the kind of support that we talked about, I'd be delighted to talk to them and receive the application and see what we can do together. And if there are any VCs interested in deal flow coming predominantly from Italian, but also Eastern European companies, because we actually have quite an interesting deal flow coming from Eastern Europe, we would be happy to help you look at some of the companies in our portfolio, and hopefully some of them could be interesting for you. So, and anyone else who got experience that they'd like to share with founders, we're always looking for interesting speakers. So those three things, I would say.
Fantastic. So hopefully some people will will message you. So Nico, thank you so much. This was amazing, really inspiring and very interesting. And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Michael. It was a real pleasure. Sorry if I went off track sometimes, but it's just something I feel about. Thank you.
A lot of emotion. That's good. Fantastic. See you. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Thanks.